Hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation, Future Ready Parks. My name is Yana. Um, just to give a little overview about myself, I'm a female designer. I have worked in the UK, Netherlands, and Germany. I've got a keen interest in master planning and urban regeneration. I've been heavily involved in the Future Ready ideology by WSP. I'm a proud feminist, a women's rights and an equality advocate. Before I go into the presentation itself, I wanted to start off with a very meaningful quote from Jane Jacobs, which reminds of how important it is to include everyone in the process, not just the design, but also planning and considering all users. And from that, I just want to give a short introduction to Future Ready. So for those of you who don't know, Future Ready is a tool that helps predict the future by identifying foreseeable trends. In this case, in the UK, WSP has identified climate change, resource society, and technology as the main trends. And Future Ready Landscape O dealt with what are the consequences of these trends and how we should consider them in terms of designing our streets and cities. So Future Ready Landscape 2.0, which is part of this presentation, shows how do we take those trends, how do we apply them in a way that is beneficial for the community. So I've talked a little bit about why Future Ready. We'll also go through the process in choosing a case study. So why local parks? Especially during these pandemic times, parks have become vital in our everyday lives, whether it's for physical health and well-being or nature enjoyment. They're essential. We did consider what makes a local park successful. A few principles that we've tried to apply in our case study. Climate adaptability and resilience, as shown case here. The contrast of how a site can look if there is no consideration for climate impact. Applied gender mainstreaming, as I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but gender inclusivity in design is quite important, not just from a mobility perspective, but also the different interests that it can create. So the counter example is a football field and how it really does restrict options for boys and girls playing on there. We also have examples of antisocial behavior, which we want to steer clear of. All mobility approach to parks and what happens when accessibility is restricted. We have a non-inclusive design. Okay, so a little bit more about where and what was the process of finding a suitable case study. So WSP has a long-standing working relationship with West London Alliance, and we had several discussions with different boroughs about this initiative. Ealing Borough was very keen to work with us, and we selected together 3 sites, and in the end narrowed it down to Glade Lane Canalside Park in Ealing. I'll talk you through the process of how we tried to look at this park, to analyze it, to apply Future Ready, and what were the conclusions. In the first instance, we did a lot of desktop site survey analysis. We looked at the site, tried to consider its restrictions and limitations, poor accessibility, mostly from the west, completely restricted from the north with the railway. There is a very poor connection on the east, so that can really be upgraded. And on the southern side, it's bordering by the canal, the Grand Union Canal. So therefore, there's another opportunity here. At the moment, the park is turning its back on the canal. Besides looking and doing site analysis, We've also noticed within the site-wide context that there is a diverse culture with temples, mosques, and churches, which is quite important to factor in when thinking about users of the park. The next level of analysis that we did is we used GIS data and a tool called Experience Data Mosaic to really extract the typologies of people living within the area. So therefore, we were able to extract two typologies. The first being municipal challenge, with people aged between 46 and 55 that are usually on benefits, a single household with no children living in council flats. And the other typology category is urban cohesion, with people aged 56 to 65, slightly higher income than the previous, either a single household or a couple with a child that has left the nest and living in their own terrace home. So this kind of community pattern and social demographic findings were quite relevant into really painting the picture of the users of the park and trying to find a design that will cater to their needs. This was a very much workshop-driven process. We've had numerous conversations with different officers from London Borough of Ealing, as well as organized brainstorming sessions across WSP globally with landscape leads from Sweden, Norway, Canada, or US, in trying to come up with a future-ready solution that is suitable and aligned with the borough's vision for the site. In the second bit of our process, in the data analysis, we had large quantities of information that we sifted and we centralized. We did surveys to try to establish a timeline of action so that the council would be willing to reflect and look at the design proposals to what is needed to be done now, in the near future, in the later future, or not do it at all because it doesn't align with the vision. So this is an example of the Do It Now. In phase one, we looked at various categories across the different phases, and all of these categories are strongly linked to the future ready trends. So climate, society, trends, resources and technology. We looked at design development. So from all these extracted findings, we slowly started to have an emerging spatial framework. For example, here we played with the spatial arrangement of the different habitats, considering the existing ones and how to enhance and even create further habitats like the woodland. And what we have as a result is the emerging spatial framework with a phase approach, where we show, for example, the existing pond in an area of wetland that we have proposed with swales that follow the canal and sewage alignment. We've decided to retain the biodiverse meadow in its location as suggested by the council, but further create a green link gateway to the park, connecting the park with the future mixed-use development that will be in the area. We've looked at strengthening accessibility across the site with mobility hubs on the west and east. Looked at implementing shared cycle pedestrian path as well as pedestrian only and across the site. We've looked at introducing habitat like the woodland area near the railway to try to transform this area in a desirable one with trim trails, buck hotels, and natural play. One thing to mention is the mounds that you see here are part of a existing planning application that was going on in parallel with our work. So that was one of the restrictions that we had to keep account of. Across this process, we have tested and try to validate the design principles. And we try to do that through the user journey. We choose 3 site-specific users. The first 2 represent the 2 typology categories that I mentioned, the municipal challenge and the urban cohesion. So that's the picnic family and the senior citizen. So these are existing profile users. But Zakia, the young professional, we thought it's important to keep in mind the soon-to-be users, and considering the high amount of development that will happen in the next years, she represents that demographic of people, of single professionals that will move and buy in the area. So to talk a bit about the process of user journeys, for example, the picnic families, they'd reach their children, they live nearby, they use the park often for a picnic, they travel to the park on foot, and use the interactive screens to figure out where they can have a picnic. The children are interested in biodiversity. They're looking at the common toad, which is existing on site, and quite a high population around the existing pond. They're benefiting from the woodland and play elements, the Bug Hotel, and yeah. The senior user, for example, Ben, he has a slightly different journey than the family. He's choosing to go on quieter routes. It's quite important to mention here that part of our proposals on mobility and inclusivity was to provide all leveled paths to really promote accessibility, quite wide, which is needed where this is shared. So Ben's interests, he's into people watching, he has a coffee and therefore promotes the local businesses. Also in line with the trend of aging population and mental health, we have proposed cognitive games that will be of benefit for elderly and people like Ben, that will be able to come with their grandchildren or nephews and play together. This has proven to be very successfully in cities like Bilbao. So that could be one of Ben's journey. He goes around the park, he enjoys the canal, and then he can also use it to commute to go to see his GP. Zakia, the young professional, she can use the park from various ways. She can commute, cycling to work from home, as well as using the park on her lunch breaks, doing yoga, or using the adult-oriented fun, the zip wire on top of the mounds for a bit more interactive play. Part of testing these design principles, we had to consider what's happening in wintertime, so seasonality and off-peak use. One of the suggestions of the council was to promote light festivals. Also considering the high number of Sikh in the area, we suggested that the park can be a scene for events for Diwali. Thinking about the community aspect, there is a suggestion that workshops from school can take place, and it can be anything from talking about biodiversity on site to promoting engagement and maintenance, so that the community gets involved and there is a sense of ownership. At the moment, the council is experiencing few aspects on antisocial behavior and littering, and a sense of ownership will definitely decrease those and promote a positive attitude towards the site. So in summary, what we tried to do with our design principles was to connect the site with the surrounding amenities, provide accessibility for the different users, from a pedestrian, cycling, mobility scooter, or wheelchair accessible users. We looked at selecting smart hotspots across the site, as well as providing quiet, safe, and lit zones, giving the public options to choose. We looked at inclusive activities for all gender and mobility, whether these are more passive or more interactive. And from a climate perspective, we looked at enriching the already existing habitats on site and creating several others in order to promote biodiversity. So a little bit on our reflection and conclusions in terms of the data and the process. We used quite heavily Experian Mosaic, as I mentioned, which I think gives a very good insight into the different typologies of community, and that's essential for designing for the people. I mentioned it was a very well driven workshop, driven process. We've had advice and collaboration from London Borough Ealing officers from climate, transport, leisure, landscape, as well as selected members from West London Alliance. Of course, further engagement is needed on a community level, because we've had a few restrictions and limitations. I mentioned the planning application that was happening at the same time with this work, but COVID as well, and a lot more can be done, of course, and community engagement is quite heavily dependent on that. In terms of gender inclusivity, so I wanted to touch the topic of gender specifically in this presentation, because across most designs there is a gender deficit use. Gender is linked quite obviously with mobility, but it's not just that. It can be related to so much more, to security, to different activities and interests. So promoting gender mainstreaming, which ensures inequalities are not perpetuated. This is a way to respond to all needs of citizens, whether it's women or men, boys and girls. Gender inclusivity should be part in our thinking at every step of the design, but as well in policy planning and legislation. Last but not least, on Future Ready, well, my conclusion was that the initial trends that we identified have evolved constantly throughout the process. We've really tried for this to be a user-centric design, and what I've noticed is that Future Ready should not be a checklist, but a process embedded way of thinking in each design, so that we have an end result of design that is suitable for the present, but is also resilient for the future. So hopefully, by now, you're able to know a little bit about the foreseeable trends in the UK. What are the key factors, some of them, to consider when designing a place with universal benefits? And what is gender mainstreaming and how do you apply this? If you would like to find out more, please follow the link or contact me directly at my email, jana.nika@wsp.com. I'd like to leave you with this last slide, which is it tries to be quite a realistic collage of the park and all the future ready implementations and how it can look like in the future. Thank you very much.